Hello my bookish friends out there in booktube land. In this video we're taking a look at 12 classic pieces of literature that are not from Europe or North America. They are worldwide classics. So without further ado, let's dig in, shall we? The first book on our list of worldwide classics outside Europe and America is Martin Rivas by Alberto Blest Gana. This is the first, or called the first, Chilean novel. And it follows our protagonist Martin Rivas, a young lad from the north poor mining areas of Chile. And his father, a gold prospector, entrusts him into the hands of one of the rich elite of Santiago, the capital of Chile. But Martin Rivas falls in love with this man's daughter, Leonore, and so ensues a tangled and tumultuous love affair. Now, will they end up getting one another? Will they fall in love, or is it doomed to failure? The point of this book, or underlying some of this book, apparently, is Garner's intention to want a evening out of society, that there shouldn't be such a division just based on monetary class distinctions. I've not read this book, but just getting the synopsis makes me think of Julien Sorel from Stendhal's The Red and the Black, and his desire to get into higher society and the blocks before him because of his lower status in life. So whether there's any similarities in that, I don't know. By the way, I just want to say all the books on this list I have not read, and that was a deliberate choice of mine to pick books I've not read, because I want you, if you've read them, to tell me what you think, or if there's ones that catch your attention that you want to read, tell me, and maybe even suggest which one you would like me to read first and maybe do a review of on this channel. Okay, so that being said, let's move on to the second book on our list. The second classic book on our list is a book which no doubt quite a few of you have probably read, and I certainly intended to read this a while ago but never got to it, and it's A House for Mr Biswas by V.S. Naipaul, who was born in Trinidad, I believe, to Indian parents. This book sounds fascinating and I've always wanted to read it. Main character is Mr Biswas. Now, he has an inauspicious entry into the book, into the world, because when he is born apparently, in inverted commas, in the wrong way, whatever that means, and he also has on one hand a sixth finger. This doesn't bode well, and it's prophesied of him that he's going to lead some kind of doomed life, and that he's going to be the downfall of his mother and father. And they're also told by the sage that you should keep him away from water. Well, of course, as he gets older as a kid, he's taking a goat out and he comes across a stream. He's never seen water before, and the goat is lost, and certain things unfold which begin to make it look like the prophecy about him, or the things said about him, are accurate. And so goes on his life as he continues to grow in this Bildungsroman. And one of the things, there's plenty of family affairs that go on, but one of the things that Moen wants to do is to build his own house. And hence the title, A House for Mr Biswas. Because that would be a symbol of his independence, that he has achieved something in life. And apparently it's symbolic of also finding a personal identity, building your own house, as it were. That reminds me of Ian Forster's Room with a View. The room is not a room, it's your outlook. So this house stands for something bigger. Have you read A House for Mr Biswas, or anything by V.S. Naipaul, like A Bend in the River, for instance? The third book on our list of classics is from the Kenyan author Grace Ogot, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I tried to get my pronunciation by watching some Kenyan news outlets about a very fascinating life that Grace lived as well. Only died in 2015. Now, she wrote this book in 1966, and the book itself is set in the 1930s. And our main protagonists are both of the Luo people, which I believe is like Western Kenya, North Tanzanian area. That's the Mara people. And it focuses on Luo emigration, because our main protagonist, Achola, and her husband emigrate from Kenya into Tanzania looking for fertile land so that they can establish a life and gain some wealth. But it brings them, the story develops slowly into interacting with the tribes and tribal strife, infighting, jealousies, envies. And Achola gets a mysterious disease. And when the hospital can't work out what to do about this disease, they turn to the medicine man of the village. Apparently, Ugot describes the Luo people beautifully. She has a great sense of place, and most of her works are set against Lake Tanzania, which that in itself makes me want to read it because I love descriptive scenery. But she said of this book that she wanted to capture the inner beliefs of her people and how there's something deeply ingrained that when the church fails them and can't explain something, when modern medicine fails with the hospital, the Western hospitals, they'll always turn back to what they truly feel secure in with the traditions of their ancestors. So that was The Promised Land by Grace Ugot. Our fourth classic is by the Japanese writer Junichiro Tanizaki and is the Makioka Sisters. Some have said this is one of the finest books written in the 20th century. It concerns itself with, as the title says, the Makioka Sisters, who are an elite family from Osaka in sort of the interwar years. I think this covers the years 1936 to 1941, obviously when World War breaks out between Japan and America. And it shows the gradual declining of the elite class in Imperial Japan. Because you have 4 sisters. Now, the plot will revolve around the youngest one, but you have Tsuruko is the eldest sister with her husband. Then you have Sachiko is another one. Then the 2 youngest sisters, which is Taiko and Yukiko, they're not married, and they go between the homes of their sisters and the family estate. But up to a point, the story is going to revolve, by the way, around Yukiko getting a suitable marriage. Because up to now, she's had many suitors, but they've been too beneath the family. However, things are changing. The family is losing some of its money. It's not as prominent as it once was. And so the story revolves on trying to find a good suitor for Yukiko, but also the ingrained feelings that belong to being a proud family, and who can you accept and who do you turn down. I don't know the plot inside out. I know it pivots on Yukiko's suitor. And I know that while she's turned down others, it comes as a shock when she is turned down by someone that they think could be a good suitor. But what we get is also an insight into life in this time, and the deep feeling and thoughts, the sentiments of people in a changing world. In fact, a vastly changing world if you're talking about life in the late 30s in Japan. And of course, not even knowing of the imminent disaster which would face them in World War II. So that was the Makioka Sisters by Tanizaki. Have you read it? I'm sure some of you will have, but I know that one person, who was it, David Mitchell, who is the British comedian and wit and very intelligent man, I think he thinks it's one of the top 20 books of the 20th century, so that's quite a recommendation in itself. The fifth classic on our list is from the great Brazilian author Machado de Assis. I've been wanting to read this book for ages, and I promised to make this year the year I read this book in particular, and it is Dom Casmurro, which may be the most famous of all Brazilian classics. I've had a lot of Brazilian commentators in the comment section say that this is part of the standard school syllabus in Brazil. Now, it follows quite a simple plot, a tried and tested plot. Boy meets girl next door, fall in love, but something comes in the way. You see, Betinho, who had become Dom Casmurro, he is our sort of narrator, and he's writing this almost as his memoirs when he's older. I believe Dom Casmurro in English would be Lord Taciturn, so obviously things turn a bit sour here. He's been promised to join a priest's seminary, And so although he's fallen in love and that him and the girl have promised to be with each other and promised to marry one another, he has to go away and satisfy his time as a priest. And Giacis explains that kind of community and people's the way people relate to God in their lives, not necessarily in a religious way, somewhat irreligious. Machado Giacis, if you've never read him, I've read posthumous memoirs of Bras Cubas, and he's quite irreverent at times. He's really, really funny and an astute observer of people. But Betinho will eventually come out of the seminary and he will marry his love of his youth, except now comes in all of the troubles and the jealousy and the bitterness and the losing of happiness and the big question. Does she commit adultery? Does she cheat on him? And apparently, I've had someone in the comment section say, if you ever meet a Brazilian person and you say, did she cheat on him? They will know immediately what you mean because of this book. And we're going to get the reflections of this man and how it's changed his life throughout, and what the suspicions are like for a person when they think their partner has cheated on them, but also with humour as well thrown in. If you've never read Giacis, I do recommend that you read one of his books. Like I say, I've read the posthumous memoirs of Bras Cubas, otherwise known as Epitaph of a Small Winner, but this is the great book that he wrote. The sixth classic on our list is from the Indian author unearth, and it is Samskara. Now, this book really sounds fascinating to me. What we have, in a village in India, there is a Brahmin called Naranapa, and he's forsaken his duties as a Brahmin, and he's become practically apostate. You know, he's talking to Muslims, he's eating meat, he goes fishing in the temple pond, and worst of all, he's divorced his wife and taken in a lower caste, almost prostitute woman that he lives with. But the other Brahmins haven't excommunicated him, and then he dies. Now, the problem here is someone has to do the rites of burial for this man, but no one wants to do it because a Brahmin has to do it. But if they do it for an apostate, they fear it may bring on his sins all onto them, so they don't know what to do. So the village send for, and they can't eat until he is buried. So it's a continual problem. They hate him when he's alive, he's a nuisance when he's dead. So they send for another Brahmin who's not even 40. It's Praneshacharya, I believe his name is, if I'm pronouncing that right. And this Brahmin, he is renowned for being very versed in all of the religious rites. He's very intelligent. He's wise in the way that he deduces things, and they want him to come and resolve the problem. He comes, and then the story turns to his own journey of self-discovery as he tries to work out the answers, and he has to expand his horizons, which lead him on little adventures which change him as well, which cause him to reflect in on himself. I don't know at all where this story goes, nor how it ends, how it's resolved, but I love the idea of the plot. I think it's brilliant. This is one of the great things about reading from other cultures, is it's a different way of seeing the world, but the human feelings will all remain the same. It doesn't matter what colour you are, it doesn't matter what language you speak, it doesn't matter what time period you live in. Whatever book, if it's written well, it will speak to a human being. We recognise the feelings inside our beating chest. So that was the sixth one, Samskara. Our seventh classic on the list is a book that sounds phenomenal in the way it's constructed, something I've not really come across before, and it is Hopscotch by the Argentine author Julio Cortázar. I love the picture to this book as well, the front cover. So, first of all, a little bit about the story, and then the really intriguing bit about the way it's written. In this book, you have our main character, who is Horatio Oliveira, and we start in the first part of the book with him looking for the woman that he passionately loves, who is called Lucia. She's Uruguayan, but through the book she's more commonly known as La Maga. Now, he's in Paris looking under the bridges, thinking that maybe, I'm guessing he thinks she must be destitute and lost. They've been separated because although she's full of passion and he loves her for that, he's highly intellectual. And sometimes he gets frustrated or disappointed because she's not as intellectual. And when he talks to lots of his friends, which is the Serpent Club, a bunch of bohemians, La Serpentine, she can't converse on the same level, but nonetheless they've got this passion. There is something in the book which explains one of the things that divides them as well, but I'm not going to go into what that is, but you do get their history in the book as well. And it's their story. It also features suspicion, and it features jealousy and whether someone's committed adultery as well, and all that kind of stuff. However, this is what I find most fascinating about the way this is written. Cortazar writes Hopscotch in 155 chapters. Shorter chapters, by the way, otherwise that'd be one massive book. But he himself says that the last 99 chapters are expendable, as in you could still get the story without reading them. On top of that, Cortazar then says that he has a recommended reading order of the chapters to get the book a certain way, but you can create your own version of reading, not linear. You don't have to read chapters 1 through 155. You don't have to do it that way. In fact, you can trace people around and events in different chapters hopscotching about. You jump places, and that's where the name of the book comes from, Hopscotch. The idea of that to me sounds mind-bending. It sounds thrilling, exciting. I would imagine at the same time that's experimental, so it may be a bit tough if you go into it trying to read it as a standard book. But if you're looking to stretch your understanding or even your awareness of how literature can be written in different ways, this book certainly sounds like one to enjoy. Has anyone out there read Hopscotch? What did you think of it? Especially if you come from Argentina. What's your personal view of it? So there we are. That was our next one, Hopscotch by Julio Cortazar. Our eighth book on our worldwide classic list is from the Ghanaian writer Aikwe Ama, who, if I've pronounced that right, who wrote The Beautiful Ones Are Not Here Yet. Now, this book was written in 1968, and Ama apparently was very interested in looking at the political corruption of the time, of the greed and materialism that was infesting Ghana and African nations as Ama saw it. So in our story, we have an unnamed narrator who is a railroad clerk, and he's offered money to do something a bit corrupt. But he turns it down. He says, no, I don't want anything to do with that. And he goes home and he tells his wife what had happened. And she says, why would you turn down something that could make our life better, that could allow us to have more things and be more presentable to some of our friends? As it happens, they're going to meet with a friend family for dinner. And this friend works for the government. Now, when he comes along, before he comes along, the wife says to our narrator that he has an offer. Oh, here's the cat. There you go. This is Marley, everybody. Say hello, Marley. Yeah, there you go. This man has an offer that will help our narrator make money. And it's to do with a fishing boat, to do with the fishing industry. And so the story progresses from there, and our narrator's dilemma and the sense of feeling pressure from friends and society, pressure from one's own family, but then conscience and the need to do what is right. What is most important in life? It's all well and good giving tacit allegiance to virtue and doing what is good, but what about the demands of everyday living and getting ahead? That's something that I find fascinating in the style of the idea of this book. Has any one of you read it? Please let me know in the comments. The ninth book on our list is Silence by Shusaku Endo, another Japanese author. This was written in 1966, and I meant to read this last year, but personal events, family affairs got in the way. But it sounds so enthralling. This sounds very moving, soul-churning, even painful, and sticks you in on the horns of a dilemma kind of thing. How would you go about this with your conscience? So our protagonist is the Jesuit missionary Sebastião Rodrigues, who goes over to Japan because it's heard that his mentor is now become apostate from his church. This is interesting. I've never talked about apostasy on my channel, and this list, 2 books have apostasy in them. Anyway, when he gets there, Sebastião realizes or finds that Christians have been forced underground by the local government because they're being persecuted. They're being persecuted really badly. If someone is suspected of being a Christian, they're given something called a fumi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is like a figure of Christ, and they're told to stamp on it and break it, which would be like a visceral denying of Christ. If they don't, they get tortured, and one of the ways they get tortured is to be hung upside down and slowly bled to death. So not a pleasant way to go, really. So there's the idea of martyrdom, but it's an ugly martyrdom. And Sebastião eventually, he will get caught, and they change tack on how to punish and torture people. Now, instead of asking him to stamp on a fumi, what they'll do is, they'll kill him, what they'll do is, if he doesn't stamp on it, they will kill others in front of him, his Christian brethren. Now what do you do? When it's not martyrdom for self, is it morally correct to let others die and you denounce your God? How is he going to deal with this? I don't know the answer, but it's an absolute great gateway into exploring dilemmas of conscience, the categorical nature of belief, of standards that you hold to. I don't know if any of you have read Silence, but if you have, leave me a comment down below, and does it appeal to you? The 10th book on our list is actually an omnibus of 3 novellas by R.K. Narayan called the Malgudi Omnibus. Now, do you like stories of rural life? Do you like stories of villages and the interactions of villagers and the day-to-day gossip and things that they get into? Well, if you do, this apparently is the book for you, because this is set in an old-time village in northern India, and we have 3 books, which is Swami and Friends, The Bachelor of Arts, and The English Teacher, in which the whole story, or 3 all tied together but are separate, we just get introduced to life in a village in the post-colonial era of India. And apparently this is absolutely charming. I know nothing more about it, except that during quite a lot of research, this book kept coming up. This book was highly recommended again and again, and it appears on loads of lists. And so I thought I'd bring it to your attention. Has anyone read even one of the novellas within this omnibus? If you have, please tell me down below what you thought of it. And by the way, I encourage you all, if you're watching, read the comments below, because you might get a bit more information on some of these books that may make you think, yes, I'm going to read that, and add it to your list for 2024. The 11th book on our list is by the great Kenyan author Ngugi. Now, I'm hoping I pronounced that correct. I've watched lots of interviews of him, and he seems to say that to my ear. The N seems to be completely silent in pronunciation, but I'm bound to have got it wrong. However, what an interesting man. The way he speaks is captivating. He's very, very thoughtful. And I've never read any of his books. And this book that I'm about to recommend has grabbed my attention because of the plot idea. Again, we are having a soul-searching story of conscience, but man, this would be pretty trialsome to go through. So, our main character is an introverted villager called Mugo. He's part of the Mau Mau people. And he is asked to give a speech on Uhuru, which is the day that celebrates independence. Now, Mugo, he is held to be this great hero, stoic figure, because in the uprising, a war beforehand, he had been caught by the opposition and he had been maltreated, kept in prison, beaten, all that kind of stuff. So people think he's absolutely great, but he has a dark secret. You see, someone else that was caught back in those days was a sort of friend of his or acquaintance of his called Kihaiki or Kihaika. And this guy was put to death. And so he's a bit of a martyr to the Mau Mau people. What they don't know is it was Mugo that had dobbed him in, that had handed him in, and then he had been executed. Partly because he was a bit worried about the guy, and secondly because there was a prize on his head. And so imagine the conscience dilemma. People hold you up, they esteem you, they think you're someone great, but you're actually responsible for the death of someone else they hold to be a martyr. I mean, imagine if that got out. But it gets worse. There is another character. Now, what's his name? I can't remember all the names. Karahan, something like that. Who some of the soldiers, the warriors of the Mau Mau people, and their general believes was the one who handed in or betrayed Kihaiki. And so they're going to execute him. Of course, Mugo knows that this isn't the man. This is, a bit of a Jean Valjean moment where he sees the guy who's going to take the punishment for him. What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. I just love this kind of gnarly setup where you are caught on... This is more than the horns of a dilemma. This is more than just, I'll keep silent and take false acclaim. This is someone is going to die if I stay silent. So that sounds fantastic to me. Have you read this book? Have you heard of this author? If not, please go and look him up and listen to some of his interviews. He is quite someone to listen to. I really enjoyed it. The 12th book on our list of world classics is by Japan's most beloved author, and that's Natsume Shoseki, if I'm pronouncing that right, probably way off. There are 3 Japanese writers on this list, you may have noticed. That's because so many of you have asked me about Japanese literature, and it's not something I'm up on. I've read some, but it is something I'd really like to get into. They have a very fine literary tradition. Now, Shoseki, if I've got that right, probably, like I say, a million miles off, sorry. Please give me a phonetic pronunciation underneath if you speak Japanese. The book I want to pick out is Botchan. And this sounds quite a hoot to read. It's quite short as well. It's under 200 pages. So Botchan is our main protagonist. He's a young man from Tokyo who is a teacher. And he's sent out into sort of the hinterlands, into the rural hick area of Japan, where he joins a school. But you see, that's very traditional backgrounds. And very, like any rural area, it's developed its own way of thinking, its own cosmos, its own mores. And so he comes with the ever westernizing ideas that have been founded in the major cities, the intellectual sort of West. And there's a clash. He's very naive when it comes to dealing with the pupils, so they're always pranking him and playing on him. And he's got quite a temper, he's got a bit of a fighter's past. On top of that, he's having trouble with the staff. And interestingly, a lot is made of Botchan's writing of nicknames for people. There's a lot of meaning inside that. One of the staff members, who's a bit against him but has this idea, is called Red Shirt. And another of the staff members is called Porcupine, I believe is what Botchan calls them. And they sort of want to get him on board with their side of things, and he's caught in the middle. And apparently it's quite a hoot to read. And I would, again, it doesn't matter the background. That's human interaction. Being pranked, being out of your cultural habitat, being pulled hither and thither, having feelings of being infuriated that people don't see things your way. That is something you recognise whatever culture you're from. And so this short story, it's not a short story, it's a novella, maybe just over a novella if it's 200 pages, holds out a lot of promise. And it sounds quite a light tone, which I do enjoy a good light read. I also want to read Japan's favourite author, and I could have picked other ones of his which are much deeper and more introspective, but we've got quite a few of those on the list, so I thought I'd pick this one. So that's the last one, Botchan by Natsume Shoseki, or Soseki, I don't know. So there were our 12 classic books from around the world that are not European or North American. Which one stood out to you? Like I say, I couldn't give you much depth about them because I've not read any. That's deliberate because I want to expand into reading from other cultures as well. My main focus is European classics and modern American classics, but humans are humans regardless of religion, regardless of economic status, regardless of skin colour, regardless of language, regardless of age lived in. We can live a million lives through these books, and we can be introduced to observations and ways of seeing the world that we've never heard of before, which is great. You know, because humans have developed cultures because they recognise something true about the world around them. So why not pick it up? Until the next time I see you, I wish you joy in your reading.